Well, I'm glad to be with everybody and welcome. We have a pretty packed agenda today, so I want to go ahead and get us started. I want to introduce myself for those of you who don't know who I am. My name is Kiami Harris, and I am the um, Chief Equity and Strategy Officer here at ECFC.
Okay.
And
Now I'm
it's very exciting to be with you all today as we are sharing our strategic plan, Galvanizing Philanthropy, Building a Just Future for Children and Families. I won't be with you too long. Shannon was not able to be with us today, but she does send some remarks that I'm going to share with you. But before we do that, I want you to know that our strategic plan was developed in partnership with some very, very smart, hardworking members of ECFC, and I'm going to introduce them. Sarah Vecchiotti, Eddie Gale, Becca Graves, and where are you, Eric? And Eric is there as well. So they're going to be sharing the plan with you today and sharing aspects of our strategic plan and talking about their experiences with ECFC, how all of you all can support some of the strategies and some of the outcomes that are in the plan. But this committee, again, was very smart, dedicated, insightful, and we're super, super grateful for them. The committee itself demonstrated our overall ECFC hallmark, which is people willing to volunteer in the community to make the collective work better. And, we hope that this plan opens up plenty of opportunities for all of our ECF members to do just that. So our last and first plan was a building plan that set up an infrastructure that has served us well during tumultuous times. And so we've come through the pandemic and with the racial reckoning in our country, it has allowed us to have community and support to be responsive and nimble and to try to do better together to serve our communities. So we're proud of the way that the plan set us up to serve. And this next plan really calls for us to build on that and to take some of what we've developed, like our racial equity principles and our collective action experiments, and bring them together to build on all of our strengths. And so I am hoping that, again, that you will see yourself in the plan because this plan is the strategies are centered on partners and member voices. And so I'm going to ask you to move to the next slide, Rena, so that you can see some of what you all said as we were developing the plan in partnership. And I am going to turn it over to our strategic planning committee again to share more of our value proposition, some of our strategic priorities, and then we'll have lots of time for you all to give us some feedback, your thoughts, and have conversations. So this is an opportunity, again, for us to share with you, for you to be in conversation and dialogue with us, and we hope that you will ask all of the questions, and again, just share. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Eddie, to take us away.
Hi, Eddie Gale here. I'm with the A.D. Henderson Foundation, and I do work in the state of Vermont, and the foundation is also active in Broward County, Florida. I want to talk about the value proposition, which is both why I want to belong to this organization, as well as why I want my board of directors, a small family foundation, to pay the dues to belong, because I think that we do get this value here. And the three key pieces that I zero in on is to learn, to connect, and to catalyze. And by learning, there's just all that information out there. And I am not trained in early childhood. I picked up a heck of a lot via osmosis through the years, but there is just a ton of good information, especially on the national level, that I otherwise would not have easy access to, that I'm going to get, and sort of like in a one-way street. And then there's the connect, there's the building relationships with my colleagues that I find, we just learn a lot from each other. Sometimes we're just affirming that we're all on the right track. Sometimes we're commiserating, going back to how we interact with those boards when we go back home. And it's really nice to have a community of partners with a similar experience to help us move this work forward. And then this organization identifies some really major initiatives where individual foundations would like to take some work forward, and they would like to come together and to do that in unison and at a level that none of us could probably do on our own, but that we could do it together and find new partners and take sometimes what's regional work out to a national level. And so the Raising Childcare Fund would be an example of that, of how do we build grassroots empowerment across the country to further these objectives. So, anyway, so those are the three values or the value proposition that we want to have this organization follow through on, which is the opportunity to learn, to connect, and to catalyze. And I will hand it off to our next person if that's the right time. Okay, and what we have on the screen at the moment are just some specific examples of how we can be doing all of these things. And the ultimate one is probably the big bet, when we want to get together and do something that's just significantly beyond all of us. Okay, so Kiami, that's what I've got if we're ready to go on to the next team.
Thanks so much, Eddie. We appreciate you. The next piece of our work is that we want to share with you are our strategic priorities for 2023 and through 2028. And I'm going to turn it over to Becca and Eric to share with us.
Thanks, Kiami. Hi, everybody. Really good to see so many familiar faces and some new folks on the on this presentation. So I'm really I can't tell you how excited I am for everyone to have a chance to look at this. We've been working on it for quite some time, and I think we all feel like this is at a point where it's time to get everybody else's reaction and input on this. And really excited to share what we've got next. I know you all have received a copy of this. I would encourage you to, if you haven't, to go and look at the appendices to this. I think it's really important for you to get a sense of the depth of information gathering that went through this, so that I just want it to be known that this was very well thought out and very well researched. I don't believe we have our consultants on the call today, but my thanks to them too for the great guidance that they gave us. I'm going to talk a little bit about the first two or two of the priorities, which is our commitment to racial equity, and to talk about policy and narrative change. And then Becca, after me, will talk about the other two. It was clear from the membership that ECFC should prioritize racial equity. This is not something that's completely new to our organization. And we really tried to lean into the great work that had been done up to this point, as we talked about what needed to be in the strategic plan. We ran these concepts by the Racial Equity Work Group. We were making sure they were aligning with our policy statements around that. And fortunately, during the course of this activity, Kami joined the team and really added a lot into our thinking and into what you see here. We were asked to take a bold stance on this, and we also wanted to recognize that not all members of the of ECFC, either as individuals or in the organization, were all in the same place. So we wanted to, as Eddie talked about, really serve as a space where people can learn and explore in safety. We wanted to make sure that we were aligning with ECFC's culture of relationships to support our members, and I think you'll see that relationship theme throughout the rest of the document. And again, we wanted to make sure that we were anchoring our racial equity work in our foundational documents, but also across all of our work, and to try to embed that in our foundations and our principles. And we wanted to make sure that that members who wanted to would be able to use these spaces as a place to not only support their own individual learning, but what they might also do with that information when they went back to their home institutions. And finally, to make sure that we understood that we could not do all of this alone, that we needed to do a lot of it in partnership. So I hope that all comes out when you look at the information. Onto the policy and narrative change. For those of you who were at the spring meeting, and we did some work with the consultants around the policy piece of it, I think it's fair to say that that was the area where there was probably the least amount of consensus around exactly what policy meant and what did it mean for ECFC. But I think all of that information was really important for us as we think about what we're going to do going forward. And again, as we did in racial equity, we really wanted to inform this through the data and the information that we received from members to make sure that we were anchoring this in the policy statements that we've already provided. Just as a side note, many of the folks that are on this committee were also part of the policy work group. So we were really, I think, had a good grounding in that. We wanted to make sure that the policy aligned with our vision and mission, and that is to impact policies and systems in support of young children and families. And as in racial equity, to make sure that we were focusing on relationships as a pathway for us to find avenues for collaboration and to work together. And to make sure that we were working with external partners, and to do that in an inclusive way, which would include not just sort of advocates, but also communities, providers, families, parents, et cetera. And I think finally in that area, I think what also became apparent was that there was a need to build our communications muscles and infrastructure to be able to help support some of these ambitions. With that, I will pass it on to Becca.
Thanks, Eric. Hey, everybody. I know a lot of you. For those that I don't, my name is Becca Graves. I'm with Perigee Fund in Seattle, and we joined ECFC maybe about 4 years ago as a brand new philanthropy. So it is exciting for me to talk about the part of the strategy that is about bolstering relationships within early childhood philanthropy and also beyond in some interesting ways. It's certainly one of the things that we benefited from tremendously as an entity, and for me as an individual new to the arena. And some of the priorities within this area of the strategy will sound very familiar to all of you. A lot of it is a continuation of what ECFC has done since its inception, but we have grown. And with growth, the opportunity to make connections, build relationships, cross issue areas, connect across local, state, national interests and experiences, bridge into the many different kinds of issues that connect in with early childhood priorities. All of that becomes much more interesting. As a membership, we have a variety of different perspectives, situations, and levels of experience, identities, locations, politics, all the above. And so there's a big emphasis in the strategic plan on continuing to do what ECFC has been about since the beginning, and becoming a little bit more structured and intentional in some areas as we've grown, to systematize a little bit more, we'll get into the infrastructure conversation, but to staff well and to be really checking in with the full membership regularly about the connections and relationships that are a priority and ways to deepen them. There are a lot of bullet points on here, and I also think that in this area of the strategic plan, the work is about member engagement and engagement within relationships, which we know are so powerful for motivation, consolation, inspiration, learning, all of the above. And one of the things that is clear in the strategic plan is that listening to members and growing with members' interests and relationships is really a priority. Let's move to the next slide. I personally am very passionate about infrastructure. With growth, infrastructure becomes even more of a priority. And so as a committee and in the data that the consultants collected, listening to existing members and hearing about priorities and opportunities, the discussion centered on infrastructure as well as all of the outward facing things that ECFC does. And so obviously this is about staffing. It is also about exciting things like process and regularly collecting perspectives in a way that can inform the priorities of ECFC. The different committees of ECFC are positioned well to deepen some things like member engagement. And as we grow as a membership, understanding the places where members are most engaged and what we all need from each other. You know, I think many of us experience ECFC as a reciprocal proposition. We don't come just to get, but we also come to contribute. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, particularly in that kind of activist role that ECFC plays in a number of ways, is thinking in an intentional way about what are the criteria that the organization, the membership needs to weigh in order to take on new big things. You know, we're not here only to learn, we're not here only to connect, we are also here to do things together, things that we might not be able to do on our own. With our limited sphere or perspectives or resources. The diversity of the membership is incredibly important, and we can do different things because of it. And we can also do different things when we have the infrastructure and intentional decisions that we make based on member interests, the commitment to racial equity, and a host of other things to do something that isn't being done elsewhere. So that to me was a really important part of the conversation and also really exciting. I know there's another page here. The infrastructure thinking goes on in some important and hopefully manageable ways for the team that supports all of us and the organization, and also works really hard to reach beyond the membership, see some of what's happening in a variety of different sectors. Include us in powerful conversations about equity and inclusion, justice, et cetera, and keep us focused not just on what we're doing, but also on things that we should be looking outward towards and reflecting on internally. So there's a lot there, and I credit to the staff for thinking really hard about what we need to do in order to live our aspirations and do it in a way that engages all of us and is sustainable and is resourced and is reasonable.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Kiami.
Thank you, Becca. Thank you, Eric. We appreciate that amazing presentation of our strategic priorities. And as you can see, or as you've heard, our team of members, they were very intentional as we were putting this plan together about racial equity and justice being at the center of what we do. As you know, this work around racial equity and justice is not new work for us, but we wanted to ensure that we call it out and that we are intentional, and it is weaved into all of the things that we will do in 2023 and beyond. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit about our racial equity and justice principles that we are hoping that we can, we want you to see them. We want you to kind of take them in, but understand that this is an iterative process. And I want to tell you why that is. Our racial equity work group has seen them, they've weighed in on them, but this is not the final piece of it. We've also shared it with our Indigenous work group to get their thinking on it. We've shared it with some of our members as well to get thinking on it. This is the beginnings pieces of it. Racial equity and justice is, again, very important into the work that we're doing. I was hired in August to help support this work. We started back in 2019 being very intentional about centering racial equity and justice in our work, and have done many things along the way up to 2023 to ensure that we are being true to kind of what we said we want to do, and continuing. And you will see that there's a little bit more wordsmithing that needs to be done, some changes that we're going to make, and we will share this back out with you when we've gotten the feedback that we need from our racial equity work group and our indigenous work group. And if you see anything as we're talking today that you feel like we should be thinking about and adding, certainly feel free to share that with us, and we will have discussion and try to incorporate some of those things into these principles. But again, wanted you to see them, wanted you to understand that we're very serious and very intentional about the work that we want to do as it relates to racial equity and justice. My work has been in the past few months to getting to know so many of you and hearing about your work. We recognize, as was shared earlier, that we're not all in the same place, but we all do have a desire to ensure that this is a more just and equitable place, and more equitable than it was, than it has been. And this is a journey. Of course, this is not just one destination, but that we will all get there. So I know that sometimes it feels very uncomfortable to have these conversations, but these are the conversations that are important to have, and that we will have, that we will continue to have. That again, it will be infused throughout all of the work that we do. That this is not something that we feel is going to be performative, that we will just again do one time, but that we will continue to center racial equity and justice. And so I hope that you can see our passion and commitment to this, and mine as well, and know that I'm here to support all of your work, both where you are, where you sit in your organizations, and also as members of ECFC. This is my role. And again, just want to thank you for your input. Many of you hopefully will see your input in these principles and in the plan as well. And so again, please feel free to drop any questions in there. We will have open questions and answers and discussion throughout this conversation today. So I am going to pause for a moment, and again, see if any comments come into mind or into the chat. Don't be shy. And we will come back to this. And again, ask me, Kiami, throw up any slides that you feel like you want to see along the way. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Sarah. We're a little ahead of schedule, which leaves us much more time for conversation.
Great. Love conversation, right? So I would just like to start off by saying thank you as well to everybody. One, to the ECFC staff who worked so hard and provided input on the plan, as well as to the members. You might not remember the survey that you filled out or the focus group that you participated in or interviews, but I think we had some collective input from everybody, and also the external stakeholders that Kiami mentioned earlier. So I just want to say thank you to the team that pulled this together, and our consultants, Nima and Lauren, who are fantastic. So I do feel like this is data informed, as Eric said earlier, and research informed. And so I think it's good to just thank everyone and appreciate everyone's hard work towards this effort. I will also say that we engaged on the strategic planning process, not to look at the past 5 years from the initial strategic plan from 5 years ago in a way of relitigating vision and all that, right? We call this a refresh, and really wanted to figure out some of the how-tos of how we could grow moving forward. And I feel like the strategic plan has really met that goal and met that challenge. And in many ways, I feel like we didn't really take away anything from the work. We built from the strengths, and all we've done is kind of add and amplify things that we want to do. So we've kind of made our job a little bit more complex, but it's worth it, right? So anyway, you can tell from the desired impacts, right, that we're really talking about continuing the work that ECFC does, not in this transactional relationship of people just attend meetings and webinars, right? It is really more a transformational experience. And so you'll see in our short-term and our long-term goals, language like deeper relationships, right, with the members. So we'll be engaging and working with individual foundations, you know, where the starting point is for each foundation to move forward in our agenda, and to be responsive to creating more intimate transformational relationships amongst members. Same also with our external partners, same type of thing, deeper relationships, more of a engaged conversation between folks, so that we can become a place that is credible and trusted and brave, not just for early care and education, but also for the racial equity issues, and also for the intersectionality of issues, right? So we've built that strong foundation, and now we just want to even do more with the membership and with external stakeholders. So that's what these next two slides will show, is this idea of deeper relationships, more transformational, intimate, more coordinating, more organizing amongst each other, as well as really making sure that the centering of racial equity becomes our DNA, right? So that's what we're moving towards. And that means thinking more about power dynamics and transforming those power dynamics, right? So leveraging, sharing, ceding power where it makes sense to move our agenda forward for ECFC. And you'll see also this language of bold, right? Like ECFC wants to help individual foundations within the membership to be bold, and then also for ECFC as an entity to be bold and thinking about how we can do our work. And so that's why all of those slides on the strategic priorities that were shared, there's a lot of bullets there. I don't know if you've noticed, right? There's a lot of things that we are saying will be our strategic direction for the work that we want to do. And a lot of them are moving the work even forward and the agenda forward. Pieces like communications and policy and trying to have influence, again, the greater systems that we're trying to change are sitting there. And so this is exciting stuff. And we hope that you all are also excited about how we're envisioning moving forward to be more transformational, bold, and working at a deeper level, which is all things that take time and resources. So that's why I'm going to now transition to somewhat of a reality check for us all. Also speaking as treasurer for ECFC on the steering committee, that there's a lot of pieces here that we have work to do. And so the question is, do we have the resources to do it, right? Do we need to really think about how we're funding ECFC? And to be honest, there is a gap. So I'm just going to be open and honest, and you probably saw it in previewed when we sent out for the 2023 contributions. You saw this little language of how we're asking for more, if possible, because that's in preparation for what's to come in terms of us thinking really more strategically about how we as members are contributing and supporting ECFC. And we have to do some rethinking, not just because over time we haven't actually increased what we call dues, right, since the initial strategic plan, and given inflation and cost of living, there's that aspect, but more so because of now the work that we want to do, which is more time intensive, right, which is more complex, which is more engaged, is going to require more resources. So there's plans here for steadily increasing staff or consultants to meet the needs that we have around specifically things like strategic communications or policy. So we're not also saying that we're going to go out whole hog, right, and all of a sudden expand, but we are thinking intentionally about how can we steadily increase the support that ECFC has, right, to collectively help the membership, but also then help ECFC have its own agency, right, to move the agenda forward. And that's the piece. Like we're not just a membership organization, right? Like we do want to do more to lift the voice of us as a collective entity as well. So it's just kind of a heads up that we are now working with the budget committee. So that includes Ira, who I'm going to call out today. Thank you, Ira. And also the membership committee and the steering committee to really take seriously what do we need to do in 2024? What do we need to do in 2025? what do we need to do across the 5 years in order to make sure that what we're asking ECFC to do through this strategic plan, that we can actually follow through and implement it with the resources that are needed to support it, which means that we will have to seriously reconsider our level and support and contributions in order to really achieve the goals that we have. So I'm excited about that reality check. Maybe I'm the only one, but I think it bodes well. And I think we will take the care and attention that is needed for that process, like we took for this process here on the strategic plan. So I'll stop talking and throw it back to you, Kiami.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it. You all are so enthusiastic about the plan, and we hope that you can feel our excitement, that it's not just a plan that's on paper with words and a bunch of bullet points. It's really about being transformational. It's really about, as we said, galvanizing philanthropy to build a just future for children and families. That's really what it's about. And so we are super excited. For sure I am, because I think I am the newest member of the team. So for sure, and I came on board, as Eric said, right in the midst of this. And there's a lot of pages to this plan. There's a lot, again, bullet points, but we spent some time as a staff thinking about how do we make this real and make this less of a document that sits on a shelf, but more of a document where it's actionable and it's really doing and hitting those marks and those outcomes that we want, both long and short. And so we talked about how our work will look for the coming year and beyond. And we kind of put it into about 5 buckets, well, 6 buckets. One is around facilitating policy and narrative change. The other is around lifting proximate voices, focusing in on state and local funder engagement as well, in addition to what we do with our national funders as well. We really want to move more money to BIPOC organizations. We want to be able to shift philanthropic practice, and then also focus on our own infrastructure and capacity to be able to carry out this work. And so I just wanted to share that with you, because we'll be doing our work through these lenses. And so ensuring that kind of what we do in this year is in service to our strategic priorities, but also is within these buckets. We're building on the work that we've been doing, so we're not taking away, we're certainly adding to that. And as Sarah said, we want to ensure that we have the resources to be able to do all the great things that we have plan that you said that you want to do with us. And so I want to begin to open up the conversation around how does this resonate with you, this plan? Where do you see yourself in this work? Because you're all members. And again, this is all informed by conversations that we've had with you over the time. And some of our external partners. So I am going to open up the conversation, and you can certainly just unmute yourselves. This is an opportunity for us to dialogue together. I will say, I used to be a 3rd grade teacher, so I'm very, very used to calling on you. So just know there will be no silence here. All right.
Okay, I'll kick it off, Kiami. Thank you. First, just one logistical question, because I was just checking with my PCI colleagues. Did you say you sent the deck, or you're going to send the deck?
We're going to send the deck.
Oh, okay.
This is our first launch and rollout of the plan, and then we'll be sharing it out broadly and on our website.
Okay, then this question may have been answered in that, but one thing that I'm always trying to kind of get my head around with ECFC, because I know that, well, first of all, I do want to say thank you to the volunteers who worked on this. It really is just, I know how much work you guys have put into this. Did we land on kind of the broader perspective of ECFC being inclusive of early childhood, not just early care and education? I know that, that we kind of enter into this for different, for different reasons. And as funders, we have different priorities. And is there a recognition in the plan of kind of that broader swath of early childhood?
And so I'll turn that over to our strategic planning committee. Any one of you can take that.
I can take it. I don't know if you go to the racial equity slide, the last bullet, addressing early childhood issues using intersectional approach that advances disability justice, immigration, health, birth, equity, reproductive freedom. That's just one example of where we've said that this is not just about early care and education systems, that is taking more of a holistic approach in terms of, you know, issues that affect children and families and their well-being in general across multiple domains of interest. So health, housing, like you name it, it is sitting there. So that's just one example. And then I'll be quiet and let other people on the committee also respond.
Becca, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Yeah. Sorry, my battery went out. Kathy, I love that you asked that question. Thank you for asking it and for making it explicit, creating the opportunity for that. I am, for those of you that don't know, our foundation is focused on healing intergenerational trauma through the power of early relationships. We are a mental health funder. And while we engage in a lot of different ways in early care and education, we are intersectional in many ways. And that is really important to us with ECFC. And it was also a part of the conversation and something that we heard from members in the input and the surveys and things like that. You know, we are not only certain kinds of funders. We are not only certain early childhood interests. We are not only certain identities or positions on things. The diversity of all of that was a big part of what you all shared and what was part of the conversation.
And I'm not sure if you can see Shannon's comment in the chat, but she talked about our membership being broader with so many funders around birth equity, early relational health, family economic success, and so forth. So,
hey, can I add one other piece, which is, especially with Shannon's note, that's surely the intent. So if we haven't been explicit enough, it's our plan, and we can be sure to do so.
Yeah, and Kathy, I would probably add to that. Part of the strategy of investing in the ability to seed and foster and support relationships is a direct response to that, right? So, I mean, it's partly culture of the founding at ECFC and what we heard over and over and over and over again about how people valued this, and really thinking about that as a sort of a primary foundational piece of what the work is. That having the ability to do more of that could allow for more discussion and interaction around a variety of topics. And I think to a degree, while we've been hosting all sorts of different kinds of things in that regard, I think it is true that we were hitting up against some capacity abilities to be able to really move that even further.
thanks, Kathy, for your question. Other thoughts?
I have a question, and if it's off topic, let me know, or if it was covered, let me know. Number one, I totally agree with everybody who said great work, everyone, and really appreciate everything that was put into this. I'm curious if y'all had talked about if there are certain metrics that you want to follow and keep track of as we're going through over the next few years to kind of keep ourselves accountable for wanting to achieve these goals, or are they just not quantifiable in that kind of way? Or just if you thought about how we're going to keep ourselves accountable. And I'm seeing members smile, so I'm assuming that you did have some conversations around that.
So you're right on time with that question. And yes, we've had conversations. We had conversations as recently as last week. But what we landed on is that we wanted to put together just a small kind of group of members who have expertise around metrics and how we want to measure this. And so so I thank you for your question on that, and certainly we'll tap into you to help us think about what the metrics should be. And I will tell you, we're not going into this blindly, because our strategic planning committee and our consultants did give us some starting points on things that we should be thinking about, what we might want to measure, but we do want to flesh that out a little bit more in terms of what that looks like along the way, because of course this is a 5-year plan, and we want to set some benchmarks for what our work looks like throughout that 5 years and how we measure that. Anybody else want to add anything to that comment? Hopefully I answered it.
I'm happy to also help out as well with that. So there's a list started, I'd love to be added to that.
I'm starting the list right now, so I got you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm
Great.
happy to be on that list as well.
Me
Okay.
too. Me three.
Got it. Thanks, Sarah. Yes, I do too. I love metrics. All right. Any other questions, comments, thoughts about the plan? Rashonda, I see you on here. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts.
Hi, everyone. For those of you, thank you very much, Kiami. Hi, everyone. For those of you who I haven't had an opportunity to meet yet, I am Rashonda Perryman. I chair ECFC. And, you know, so there's a lot going into this and all of the immense hard work that is taking place. One, just like most folks have said, I just want to commend a tremendous effort on behalf of the group who really put this together, and staff and Shannon. And I just want to say it's such a realization of us thinking, and I'm talking particularly about racial equity. We have really been on a journey. Kiami mentioned that in 2019, we started really reckoning with our own selves about how and why we might move this early childhood funders collaborative and learn and connect on racial equity issues and how we might move our learning on it. And everything that you're seeing, the fact that it is now embedded really deeply within our strategic plan, the fact that Kiami mentioned in 2019, we came together and said, how might we move early childhood funders around racial equity, and soon came out of that. Like, it takes work, it takes effort, it takes staffing. And 3 years later, we have Kiami on to actually drive the agenda around that. That's just one example of the ways in which we have just been, you know, really calculated around this. The Raising Childcare Fund is another example of really seeding something, going back to the table, asking hard questions of ourselves. So I am just excited about where we are on this and what it means for us as a collective to really move forward, get dollars to more people of color-led organizations, really lean toward equity-driven outcomes. And I love the question around metrics and really driving toward that. So no question, but excited that so many people on the call and excited about where we're going. And thanks again to Shannon for her leadership and great work around all this.
Thanks, Rashonda. Appreciate it.
Can I make a quick comment? As being part of the committee and also on the steering committee, you know, it's just been interesting to kind of look across all of this at the same time. But what you know, we talked a lot about the sort of value proposition piece, right? About what is it? What's the it in ECFC? And there is an it that has been really part of the DNA since this started. And my understanding, I don't know if we have, you know, any founding members that are on this call right now, but you know, just the idea that they wanted a space to be able to talk to each other because there were not spaces that were there, and that sort of prime directive came back over and over and over and over and over again in all the interviews and all the conversations and everything we had, and that was with us, sort of living with us when we were thinking about anything that was going to happen forward, right? This is a relationship driven approach to how you do this work. But how does that butt up against a desire to do transformative things, right? And so, you know, it may not always be as a direct path to get to those places, but I think where we ultimately settled was that sort of doubling down on the relationship side of it is actually the path to get more of that stuff to happen. And so that was number one. I think number two within this sort of concept of the value proposition is to do this in a way in which members would want to contribute more than the money. And I think we've just seen an example of that, people raising their hands and stepping up to help around this. And our hope is that with greater capacity, we'll be able to manage the relationship side, but also be able to manage the contribution side in a way that really is additive. And I guess I would just encourage everybody as we continue to build this plan out. And then I'm going to ask Kiami a question. To build this plan out, how can you contribute to this work? I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for people to bring their expertise and their interests and their ideas into this space. I'm going to ask Kiami and I guess other members of the staff. And so some of you may know, maybe of these don't know, they've kind of already got started. So they had a retreat, I believe it was last week. And if I'm not mistaken, that may be the first ever ECFC retreat to really begin the process of figuring out implementation, how's everything. So I don't want to speak for staff, but Kiami, you may just take a minute just to talk broadly about what you guys were trying to do in your retreat.
Thanks, Eric. Sure. And I have Rena and April are also on here. And so I'm going to call on them as well. And so I think I shared a little bit about that. We spent 2 days together thinking deeply about who we are, our values, our mission, the vision for ECFC, and then thinking about them in the context of these strategic priorities that are driving this plan. And so we thought, this is a huge plan for sure. We're a very small staff. And we want to think about what are we already committed to doing? What do we have the capacity to do? And what do we want to really do more of? And we, again, as I shared a little bit earlier, we kind of narrowed down to 5 buckets of that we want to focus our work in, and I named those, and I'll name those again. Well, 6, including infrastructure and capacity. Certainly cannot forget that. But again, around thinking deeply around moving more dollars to BIPOC organizations and shifting philanthropic practice. But we talked about what does that really look like? Those are big words. Like what are the actions and activities that will lead to that? And so we spent some time thinking about specific actions and tasks and ways in which we will do that work. Again, talked really, really deeply around our state and local funders and the engagement there, because that membership has grown significantly since the pandemic, and wanted to ensure that we are being able to support and be in relationship and expand relationships with that population. And I'm going to stop talking, Rena, and let you have an opportunity. I see you have come on camera to just share a little bit about the experience. It was a phenomenal experience for me. One, because I had not ever been in person with our staff since I joined. And so it was nice to see everybody in person for sure. But Rena, I'll give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about what we did and how it contributes to your work.
Sure. Kiami gave a great overview of some of the kind of the buckets of things that we thought that we could work on, some of the low-hanging fruit, if you will, things that, across our different staff functions and roles, some things that kind of bubbled up that we thought we could do immediately and start thinking about. I'm really excited about some of the things we talked about related to local and state funders, because we have grown a lot and now we have a good contingent of national funders, but also state, local, and regional, as well as collaboratives. And so now we're thinking not only about topical, but also about how to make some of those connections, with work and things that are of importance to kind of like the local, to the state, to the regional funders. I appreciate that someone, Kathy, asked about the topics. We talked a lot about whether, there are topical things versus larger conversations like power building and public-private partnership. Certainly, we're not losing some of our topical things. We've got this, in addition to early care and education, we have this great contingent of members in that early relational health, maternal mental health, birth equity space. So I think for me, it was really, it was inspiring and encouraging that we now have a little more capacity thanks to having Kiami join us, and we can start thinking more about some, you know, cross-cutting things like what does membership engagement look like in the different, you know, topics or geographies, and how does that tie in with things like connecting our work down to the local level. And so I appreciated the in-person staff retreat. It was the second time I've been in a room with April, and because we're all in other states, it was the third or fourth time I think I've been in a room, maybe fifth or sixth with Shannon, but that's over the last 5 years. So it was a really great opportunity. As you all know, when you're in person, you can bounce ideas and get much deeper and also have some side things that come up. So it was a nice opportunity.
Thanks, Rena. One of the things I did want to also share that came up a lot, and we talked about lifting proximate voices and how we really want to engage the community and parents and families, and ensuring that those voices are infused into the work that we do. We know a lot of you are already doing that, but wanted to make sure that we're lifting up those stories, those experiences in our work every day. And so it's not just us thinking that we know what the needs of the communities are, but that we are really being in touch with and in conversation with those who are closest to communities. And so I did want to make sure that I lifted that up, and that is very important to all of you in the conversations that we've heard, but also very important to the staff. And it's certainly important to me as I come from a background of programmatic and community-based work, where you know, we have been in constant communication and conversation with again those who have lived experiences. And so it's really exciting work. I want to also add that as we're thinking about our value proposition around that learn, that connect, and catalyze, and we did mention it, you know, a lot of it is the building on of work that we've been doing. For example, you know, around the catalyze space, we have RCCF, you know, that is a learning lab for sure. And when we're going to continue to, you'll hear more from RCCF grantees and around the work that they're doing around racial equity, again, to bring in those voices from communities. But we'll certainly have lots of virtual programming. We have our May meeting coming up, so we'll be continuing to do some of those things and making those connections that you're used to. But certainly we are excited about expanding and adding more and being able to support you in new and exciting and greater ways. And so I want to ensure that you see yourself in all of this work, and that you're thinking about, as Eric said, as Sarah said, as Becca said, and Eddie said, ways in which you can be more connected with ECFC. And this is your membership organization for sure. It was started as a way for you all to connect with each other and learn from each other. And we want to make sure that we are able to do that and providing the places and spaces for you all to be able to do that. And so we're nearing the end of our conversation, but I wanted to pause and give April or anyone else opportunity to ask us any questions, to make any comments from what you've heard. And I'll do my wait time as I've been taught to do, trained to do as a teacher. All right. Well, I want to invite our strategic planning committee to say any final remarks that you might have before we close out today.
Just thank you for joining in with us, and that's what makes this plan work. As well as thank you, Kiami, yes, for doing a fabulous job here.
Anyone else? I'm excited that so many of you had joined us today. You know, when you hear a strategic plan rollout, it doesn't always feel as sexy or sound as sexy. So to have so many of you members who I can tell are so committed to the mission, the vision, and the organization itself, it speaks volumes. And so know that we'll be reaching out to you for opportunities, and we want you to reach out to us for ways in which you can get involved, ways that we can support your work. And we just appreciate you so much and are very thankful for all of you and all of you all on the strategic committee and all of our members. So again, we look forward to being in partnership with you in the coming year and are excited to see you at our May meeting for sure. You'll hear more about that. We have lots of programming coming up in February that we hope that you will be part of and join us. And again, just a tremendous and sincere appreciation for all of the work that you do every single day. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.